about their investigation into the deaths of the actor Gene Hackman and his wife, Betsy Arakawa.
The world was stunned when legendary Hollywood star Gene Hackman and his wife, Betsy Arakawa, were found dead in their Santa Fe home. But what was first assumed to be a tragic natural passing quickly turned into one of the most bizarre and chilling mysteries Hollywood has ever seen. Strange details began to emerge. No signs of struggle, no forced entry, and a security system that had mysteriously been tampered with. The biggest question? How had two high-profile figures been dead for weeks before anyone noticed? And then came the biggest twist of all. Investigators found evidence that someone had been watching the house before Hackman died. Security footage, GPS tracking, and financial records pointed to an unexpected suspect, his own daughter, Leslie Ann Hackman. What was she hiding? And how far did she go to cover up the truth? The answers might shock you. If you're new to the channel, I'm Elle. We post daily celebrity news and gossip updates. Make sure to like this video and subscribe for daily updates. Let's go. Hollywood has seen its fair share of tragedies, but the sudden and mysterious death of Gene Hackman and his wife, Betsy Arakawa, sent shockwaves through the industry. When the legendary actor and his wife were found dead in their Santa Fe home, the initial reports suggested natural causes. But as the investigation unfolded, it became clear. Something wasn't right. The most unsettling detail? They had been dead for weeks before anyone noticed. For a couple who still had close ties in the industry, family connections, and staff checking in on them, how was it possible that their deaths went unnoticed for so long? Even more bizarre, the crime scene felt eerily staged. No signs of forced entry, no struggle, and nothing appeared stolen. Their home, once filled with warmth, had become a frozen moment in time. Then came the first major red flag, the security system. Investigators discovered that it had been tampered with. The logs showed multiple power fluctuations, system resets, and gaps in recorded footage leading up to their deaths. Someone had been in the house, but who? And why? As detectives examined the home, more strange clues emerged. A glass of water sat on the counter, completely evaporated, suggesting it had been there for days, possibly weeks. Pill bottles were scattered in a way that felt unnatural, as if someone wanted to make it look like an accident. But the most chilling detail? The family dog was found locked in its crate, alive but barely. If Hackman and his wife had simply passed away, who put the dog in the crate? And why was it left behind? Then came the biggest shock of all. Security camera footage revealed movement outside the home in the days following Hackman's estimated time of death. A car was seen pulling up and parking outside the house for hours at a time, but no one ever went inside or came out. Who was watching the house? And were they waiting for something? At this point, the investigation took a dark turn. The more detectives dug, the more they realized this wasn't just a tragic death. This was something else. And the biggest mystery of all, why was Gene Hackman's own daughter lying about the last time she spoke to her father? From the moment investigators stepped inside Gene Hackman and Betsy Arakawa's Santa Fe home, something felt off. The couple had reportedly been dead for weeks, yet their home looked almost untouched. There was no sign of a struggle, no forced entry, and nothing stolen. At first glance, it seemed like a peaceful passing, but the details told a different story. The first major red flag was the family dog. Investigators found one of their dogs alive but locked inside a crate, barely surviving. But here's the problem. If Gene and Betsy had died suddenly, who put the dog in the crate? Even stranger, another dog was found dead inside the house with no clear cause. Had it been poisoned, starved, or was it left behind as a message? Then came the weirdest discovery yet. A glass of water sat on the counter, completely evaporated. That meant it had been sitting there for days, maybe even weeks. Nearby, a bottle of medication was knocked over, pills scattered on the floor. At first, it looked like an accident, but something felt too staged. If either Gene or Betsy had collapsed, how did the bottle tip over perfectly as if placed there? And then there was the sink. When investigators checked, they found dried-out water spots as if someone had recently used it. But no dishes, no food. Nothing that indicated normal activity. Had someone been in the house after Gene and Betsy had died? The biggest mystery? The security system. Initially, it seemed like it had been turned off, but when the police dug deeper, they found something even more chilling. The log showed multiple resets, strange power fluctuations, and gaps in recording. It was as if someone had manipulated the system, erasing specific moments but leaving just enough behind to confuse investigators. And then came the bombshell. Gene Hackman's daughter, Leslie Ann, had lied about the last time she spoke to her father. She originally claimed she had talked to him just days before his death, but phone records showed no calls, no texts, nothing for weeks. Why would she lie about something so basic? And more importantly, was she covering for someone? At this point, detectives knew this wasn't just a tragic accident. Someone was hiding something, and the deeper they dug, the more sinister the truth became. What started as a tragic but seemingly natural death of Gene Hackman and his wife, Betsy Arakawa, was now turning into something far more sinister. The unsettling details inside their Santa Fe home, the locked but starving dog, the tampered security system, the dried up water glass, and the staged pill bottles, had already raised suspicions. But when investigators dug deeper, they uncovered a trail of evidence that pointed to something much darker. The first major breakthrough came from an unexpected source, Hackman's pacemaker. Investigators accessed the device's records, which track a person's heart activity with precise timestamps. What they found? Hackman had been alive for nearly 24 hours after his last known activity. That meant he hadn't died instantly, as initially believed. He had suffered in silence, unable to call for help. Even more disturbing, his wife Betsy had likely been alive even longer. If this was a medical emergency, why didn't she call 911? Unless, of course, she wasn't able to. Then came the security footage twist. At first, investigators assumed that the system had simply been turned off, but forensic techs soon discovered something much stranger. There were random gaps in the footage, power surges that affected only the cameras, and a suspicious pattern of resets. This wasn't just an accidental malfunction. Someone had tampered with it. And when detectives checked the neighborhood's external security footage, they spotted something even more alarming. A car parked down the street for several nights in a row, always at the same time. But the car never pulled into the driveway. No one was seen entering or leaving the house. So what were they waiting for? Then, a bombshell discovery. Financial records showed that large sums of money had been moved from Hackman's accounts shortly before and after his death. The transactions had been routed through multiple accounts before landing in one place, an account linked to his daughter, Leslie Ann Hackman. Investigators now had a tangled web of suspicious activity. Gene Hackman's death timeline wasn't adding up. His wife may have been held against her will. Their security system was deliberately altered, and his daughter was linked to financial activity that shouldn't have been possible. At this point, detectives weren't just investigating a suspicious death, they were chasing a cover-up. And with every new lead, it was becoming clear. Someone wanted Hackman and his wife out of the way, but the biggest question remained: why? Just when investigators thought the case couldn't get any more disturbing, they uncovered proof that someone had been watching Gene Hackman and Betsy Arakawa in the days leading up to their deaths. This wasn't just a tragic loss of a Hollywood legend. This was a calculated, methodical operation. Security footage from a neighbor's house revealed a car parked near the Hackman residence for several nights in a row, always at the same time. But here's the chilling part: no one ever got out. The car would sit there for hours before quietly disappearing into the night. Whoever was inside wasn't there to visit. They were watching. Then came the even bigger bombshell. Investigators traced an unknown cell phone signal that had been pinging off a tower less than a mile from Hackman's home on multiple occasions. The timestamps of those pings, they matched the exact time frames that the mysterious car had been spotted. Someone was there, but why? And what were they waiting for? The next discovery made investigators' blood run cold. Gene Hackman's security system logs had been altered, but not in the way they expected. It wasn't just that the system had been shut off, it had been remotely accessed multiple times before his death. Whoever was behind this knew how to manipulate security feeds, delete footage, and make it look like a simple malfunction. Then, a chilling realization. There was a gap in the timeline. The footage inside Hackman's home cut off at 2:37 a.m. on the night before his estimated time of death. For nearly 4 hours, the house was a complete blind spot. And then, at 6:15 a.m., the cameras turned back on, just as mysteriously as they had gone dark. Was someone inside the house during that window? And if so, What did they do to Hackman and his wife? At this point, investigators weren't just looking at a suspicious death, they were staring at a premeditated plot. And the person who stood to gain the most? Gene Hackman's own daughter. As investigators pieced together the disturbing evidence surrounding Gene Hackman and Betsy Arakawa's mysterious deaths, one name kept surfacing: Leslie Ann Hackman, Gene's estranged daughter. At first, it seemed unthinkable. Could she really be involved? But as detectives dug deeper, the evidence became impossible to ignore. Leslie Ann had originally told police that she hadn't seen or spoken to her father in months, but phone records told a different story. A call had been placed from her number to Gene's landline just days before his estimated time of death. Even more suspicious, that call lasted less than 30 seconds, as if someone had dialed by accident or was checking to see if he would pick up. Then came the financial red flags. Large sums of money had been quietly moved out of Hackman's accounts before his death, landing in an offshore account linked to Leslie Ann's business dealings. Even more damning, a recently revised will had surfaced, allegedly signed by Hackman, cutting out several longtime friends and shifting more control over his estate to Leslie Ann. But handwriting experts weren't convinced. It looked forged. Investigators also discovered that Leslie Ann had been in Santa Fe the week before Gene's death, despite telling authorities she hadn't visited in months. Surveillance cameras from a nearby gas station captured her car just miles from the Hackman home on multiple occasions. And remember that mysterious car seen parked outside Gene's home at odd hours? Witnesses described the driver as a woman with light brown hair, matching Leslie Ann's description. But here's where things took an even darker turn. This wasn't just about money. Sources close to the family revealed that Leslie Ann and her father had a strained, often toxic relationship. She had reportedly resented Betsy Arakawa for years, believing she had come between her and Gene and blocked her from accessing family wealth. Some even said Leslie Ann had made threats about getting what was rightfully hers. Now, with mounting financial evidence, suspicious surveillance footage, and a paper trail of lies, investigators were no longer asking if Leslie Ann was involved. They were asking how far she was willing to go. And the most chilling possibility? Had she planned this alone, or was someone else involved? As investigators dug deeper into Gene Hackman and Betsy Arakawa's mysterious deaths, one unsettling detail stood out: the missing medications. Hackman, who had a history of heart disease, relied on a strict regimen of life-saving prescriptions. But when police searched the home, his medications were nowhere to be found. This discovery raised a chilling new theory. Was Hackman's death the result of a slow, calculated plan? If someone had been withholding or replacing his medication over time, his condition would have gradually deteriorated, making it look like a natural decline rather than something more sinister. The evidence started adding up. Friends close to Hackman reported that in the months leading up to his death, he had been feeling unusually fatigued, confused, and weak, symptoms that could have been caused by missing his heart medication. Even stranger, Betsy Arakawa had told a friend just weeks before her death that she felt like something wasn't right with her husband's health. She was planning to take him to a doctor, but she never got the chance. Then came the biggest red flag. Betsy's own medications were found, but they were completely untouched. If this was simply a case of an elderly couple forgetting to take their meds, wouldn't both of their prescriptions have been neglected? Why was only Hackman's missing? It suggested something far more calculated. Investigators now suspected that whoever was behind this had been tampering with Hackman's health for weeks, maybe even months. And the biggest suspect? His daughter, Leslie Ann. She had access to his home, a financial motive, and a history of resentment toward both her father and Betsy. More importantly, she had recently worked as a financial manager for a medical practice, giving her knowledge of prescriptions and how to manipulate dosages without raising suspicion. But if this was true, then how had Betsy died? Had she figured out what was happening? Had she confronted the wrong person at the wrong time? And, most disturbingly, had someone been in the house during their final moments? If there was still any doubt that Gene Hackman and Betsy Arakawa's deaths were more than just a tragic coincidence, the shocking legal battle that erupted after their passing erased it completely. Even before their bodies were discovered, someone had already started moving in on their fortune. The first red flag? a suspiciously timed change to Hackman's will. Investigators uncovered legal documents that had been altered just months before his death, shifting major assets and inheritance rights in a way that he had never publicly mentioned. The biggest beneficiary? His estranged daughter, Leslie Ann Hackman. Not only had her share of the estate increased significantly, but records also showed that she had been in contact with an estate lawyer multiple times in the weeks leading up to her father's death. But that wasn't even the most shocking part. Bank transactions revealed that money had been funneled out of Hackman's accounts before his death was even reported. The withdrawals weren't small either. Tens of thousands of dollars had been quietly transferred to offshore accounts, with links to financial firms connected to Leslie Ann. How was she accessing these funds before her father had even been declared dead? Then came the final betrayal. A close family friend revealed that Betsy Arakawa had confided in them just weeks before her passing, saying that she was suspicious about certain financial discrepancies in Jean's estate. She had noticed funds moving without explanation, documents missing, and strange emails regarding their accounts. She had planned to confront Jean about it and investigate further. But before she could, she was dead. At this point, investigators weren't just looking at a case of financial fraud, they were looking at a premeditated scheme. Had Leslie Ann manipulated her father's health, waited for him to die, and ensured Betsy wouldn't be around to expose it? The evidence was stacking up, and police knew it was only a matter of time before they made their move. And then, Leslie Ann made a mistake. A key witness came forward with information that turned the entire case on its head and led to her dramatic arrest. For weeks, investigators had been building their case, piecing together the financial fraud, the missing medications, and the eerie surveillance footage. But they needed one final piece of evidence, something that could directly tie Leslie Ann Hackman to her father and Betsy Arakawa's deaths. And then she made a critical mistake. Leslie Ann had been careful up until this point, denying involvement, claiming she hadn't seen her father in months, and hiring top-tier lawyers to shield herself from suspicion. But investigators were quietly monitoring her bank activity. And what they found? It blew the case wide open. Just days before Jean Hackman's official time of death, Leslie Ann had made a series of unauthorized wire transfers, shifting large sums of money from her father's estate into accounts under fake business names. She had even accessed a high-profile trust fund linked to Hackman's assets, something she shouldn't have been able to do unless she had inside knowledge of his finances. The problem? She was moving money before Hackman had even been declared dead. That was all the proof police needed. They had her. Authorities staged a sting operation. On the day Leslie Ann was set to withdraw a final, massive sum, police were already waiting. As she entered a private financial office, she was surrounded by law enforcement and taken into custody. Her arrest was swift and public, shocking those who had once dismissed the theory that a Hollywood icon's own daughter could be capable of something so sinister. But the final twist? Investigators uncovered something even darker than they expected. Forensic accountants revealed that Leslie Ann had been planning this for years. The bank records, the legal changes, the manipulated medications. This wasn't a crime of impulse. This was a long, methodical con that had been in motion far before Hackman's death. And then, the biggest question of all, was she working alone? With her arrest, investigators shifted their focus to potential accomplices, lawyers, financial advisors, or even someone inside Hackman's household. Because with an operation this elaborate, it was hard to believe she did it all on her own. Now, with the case moving to trial and shocking new evidence still coming to light, the story of Jean Hackman's tragic end is far from over.